Good afternoon and welcome back to the CNBC Africa Future of Work virtual conference and live broadcast. I'm Chris Bishop. Now this morning we featured insightful panel discussions and talks on automation, machine learning and AI, cyber security for the distributed hyper-connected workplace, and how SaaS and cloud computing can help African enterprises future-proof their business model. Now this afternoon we discussed digital transformation and IoT and big data. Now first up, digital transformation and the distributed enterprise. Digital businesses are focused on integrating digital technologies such as social, mobile, analytics, big data and cloud in the service of transforming how businesses work. The ability to digitally reimagine the business is determined in a large part by a clear digital strategy, supported by leaders who foster a culture to be able to change and invent the new. Risk-taking is becoming a cultural norm as companies seek new levels of competitive advantage, leading to higher revenues. Now joining us now are Toby Shapshak is the editor-in-chief and publisher of Stuff magazine and the panel moderator. He writes and speaks about how innovation is better in Africa and is a contributor to Forbes and the Financial Mail. He believes Africa is a mobile-driven continent. Stafford Macy is a general manager for Africa at WeWork. He has thrived in a world of disruption for more than 25 years, having been involved with companies such as Telkom, Dimension Data, Novell and Google. He has founded several fintech businesses and technology startups that have expanded globally. Gavin Reardon is an entrepreneur and investor and is the founder and managing partner at the venture capital firm Kingston Capital. He works closely with the South African government, industry associations and other investors in creating an enabling environment for tech businesses in the digital economy. Jacqueline Raw is a sales and marketing strategist and the owner and founder of Cargill, with 15 years experience in building brands, businesses and growing leaders. She is a thought leader and influencer in her industry. Her core focus is igniting and equipping SMEs, entrepreneurs and future pioneers of the industry.
Hello and welcome to, if not the future of work, definitely the future of how we interact with each other, because I'm coming to you through Zoom, which is connecting through a TV studio and being broadcast up via a satellite and back down to Earth. And that's the kind of complicated way things have always been, haven't they? We've never really seen how technology works in the background, but all of a sudden, because we're all working from home or working remotely, suddenly a lot of people have become their own IT managers and have discovered how much work goes into making your system work and how much security you need for this. So it's a busy new time of our lives. I mean, the one good thing is you can wear a t-shirt and get away with it because, you know, we're working from home. As you can see, I've converted my sitting room into a study. But that's more than it, isn't it? It's more than just taking a laptop and setting up a decent office at home. It's going to be a new way of working. And I think the sentence that has summed up this transition the most for me was an interview the New York Times did with a doctor in London, a GP, and he was talking about telemedicine, but he made a comment that I think represents really what's going on in the world right now. And he said, we've had 10 years of change in a week. And that's really what happened to so many people in the beginning, towards the end of March, when we all suddenly moved into lockdown in South Africa. But it exacerbates other trends that have been going on, or I should say accelerates other trends, because we've been moving to a new work methodology for a long time. We've been moving from the desktop computer to the cloud. The cloud is the computer where everything is hosted. The servers are there, the storage, we connect to it via a range of devices. And it doesn't really matter what device we're on, we can get our information anywhere. So is it the same? Can we get our information and do our work anywhere when we're at home? Let's start with Stafford Macy, who and I'm going to get to the idea of shared office spaces in a moment, Stafford. But I mean, is it true that you can just plonk your laptop down anywhere in the world? I mean, us technology journalists obviously been doing it for years, so have technology executives. But is it possible for everybody else to do it? And how many weights have you got behind you?
Well, you spoke about going up to a satellite and down. I'm speaking to you out of a location in South Africa in my wife's gym at
I
home,
see.
which I've been relegated to, and that's become my office. And I refuse to change the background because it makes me look fitter. So, but the question is, do we, can we? I think it's a brilliant question because we are. And to see how CIOs and enterprises have actually metamorphosized the infrastructure to support this remote learning is quite profound. And I think what it sets us on a path to do is a couple of things, because if this amount of constituents outside your business can remotely access services in this way, the question becomes, could you have as a business your AWS moment, right? Where you were doing books, and suddenly you're taking all this infrastructure and you can repurpose this infrastructure for things outside of the domain for which you built it for. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think the consequence of this change that's occurred, which is not really a change, it's an acceleration of the access of information securely and architecturally enabled the way we've done it now. I think this will lead to businesses looking at that architecture and saying, hey, if our in-house employees can access all these systems and services, why can't we open up and allow third parties to access it in the same way? And can we imagine, because of that, new services that we could build in our portfolio? So the meetings that I'm having with the CXO class of people that I'm speaking to, it's not just about enablement. I think we're beyond that step now. Can we? It's what else can we do on top of this infrastructure, and how can we grow our business and expand our portfolio? So I do think everything's changed. Absolutely.
Jacqueline, I can see you're also working from home, so conceivably things have changed for you too.
100%. So I think what COVID has presented us with is probably one of the biggest case studies on remote working at scale, and how quickly organizations can mobilize workforces in remote working using technologies that suit the business requirements or suit the business needs. I personally am a mom, so it's not just about the technology that's allowed me to work from anywhere. It's also enabled me to work, when I'm most productive, and working with clients and organizations that allow a flexibility around when you engage and how you engage has just been absolutely impactful in my space over the last couple of months, most certainly.
Indeed, and I suppose it's more than just working at home, right? Stafford, you were saying, what can we do? What else can we do? Well, your expertise is in brands, Jacqueline. How do brands embrace this, and how do brands represent or convey something that they are moving with the times? How do brands communicate to their customers what they're up to?
So I think the most meaningful way that I've seen some of my clients articulate their agility in reacting to this new way of work is how they've set their own internal teams up. I believe that real brand communication comes from a very authentic place. And when an organization, I'm in Durban, and Umhlanga is considered one of the biggest contact center hubs in South Africa, just because the tech infrastructure in that area. And I've seen contact centers that traditionally what we expect from a contact center is that it's, floors and floors and floors of people plugged into a dialer, promoting financial services, etc. I've seen them over the last couple of months move to a permanently remote agent setup where agents are able to, plug into the system and into the infrastructure from anywhere in the world and still earn commission, and that becomes sustainable. And when brands are able to do that for their people, and brands are able to be agile enough to support people to still earn their money leveraging technologies and that kind of things, that says something to the market about what they're willing to innovate through.
Indeed. And Gavin, I'm sure you're seeing this with a lot of the startups that you're working with or the small businesses, because I mean, to use the word du jour, they're having to pivot as much as Stuff Magazine has pivoted in this time. If you're a small business, you got to do what you got to do to stay afloat, but do it smartly. Can you hear me, Gavin?
Absolutely. I can. And absolutely, I think it has been a time that everyone has had to adjust tremendously in this in this environment. And hardest it have been, the small business, the startups. In some respects, so it depends on what area that you are focused on. Early on in the lockdown, one of the exercises that I did was actually consider COVID, the pandemic, and what it may do to our portfolio. And in the things that we've invested into, technology driven, it's actually, to your point earlier on, Toby, it is accelerated. And so it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are some industries that are really battling in this time, but there's some that have been accelerated to a place where they're 2 years ahead out of where they were originally forecasting. So we've seen some tremendous growth, and I think to your point around digital acceleration and what it means for how we do business, it is certainly fast tracking things at a pace. And it's about being agile and adapting in the environment.
So I've done a couple of conversations in the last few months about what's going to change and where it's going to change. And sometimes very facetiously, I say to people, nothing's going to change. It's just going to get faster. All of the trends that we've seen developing for the last few years are just happening faster. You got to get on board quicker. The gap between change and or the arrival of a technology or a service, especially a software as a service, if you don't jump on it as quickly as you possibly can, your competitors are doing
that. Absolutely. And what we've seen as technology has advanced is the movement towards, from your social platforms to moving on to mobile and your analytics and your platform analytics that then begin speaking to. I think we're going to see a fast tracking of it. And I think, to your topic about the future of work in Africa, I think one can't escape what this fast-tracked environment is going to do for the workforce in Africa, and how we are going to be increasingly coming online, bigger and bigger penetration on the mobile front, and what that begins to do in the environment, and what that begins to do for business. The business is evolving, business is changing. We are not going to be going back to the same way, and it's about how we are best positioned to take advantage of that. So really, it's always about preparation. The businesses that are excelling in this time are those that actually prepared for the digital onslaught. And in this environment, this pandemic has basically just fast-tracked that. So it's about preparation, meeting opportunity, and that's what we're seeing across startups and the portfolios.
Indeed, and I'm going to come to Stafford, but I'm not going to talk to you, Stafford, about workspaces, because I know you're gonna send the company line. But what I'm really interested in is these other services you say are going to come in, because I'm going to talk about co-working spaces and how that's shifted, and I'm deeply fascinated by it. But these other services, these other things we can do from home, right, Stafford? There's so much more we can suddenly do.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. And I think I'm not looking at it from a consumer perspective, because I think what we can do now as consumers of the technology, that's interesting, right? So the ability for people to work from home, as we call it, engage in collaboration platforms and technologies, that's fascinating. Okta did a study, and they're a security company that does two-factor authentication software. They did a study on working from home. And since over the last 3 months, the statistic, I always knew this was big, but I didn't really quantify it. 55% of the workforce across the Netherlands, Germany, France, England, and Spain in their study had never worked from home. So they did not have the equipment, they did not have the infrastructure to work from home. And in the last 3 months, we talk about this acceleration, and we actually put a metric to it. There's 55% of the top countries in Europe suddenly had a workforce that were now sitting at home with equipment connected, working. People that had never put their credit cards into a mobile site were suddenly doing it now. They were putting it into apps. They were putting it into stores. So e-commerce starts booming. I think those things are interesting. But what I find more fascinating, and I think that creates a ripple effect that we'll feel in the next 36 months, we'll see businesses having their AWS moments. And what do I mean by that? Like Amazon was a bookstore, and suddenly took its infrastructure and made it consumable by third parties and allowing it to be augmented and extended the way they did, created arguably one of the most valuable technological assets in the world today, commercially speaking, and that's Amazon AWS. Every single CEO that I'm speaking to right now, the infrastructure that they've retrofitted, that they've put in place to allow these human beings that they call employees, contractors, etc., to work in their infrastructure, that's the same infrastructure that they want to reuse and reimagine to deliver services that allow others to execute on it. So let's make it real. Imagine an insurance company delivering insurance, now suddenly having all their staff working from home, looking at that infrastructure and that architecture and saying, hey, can't we build data insurance services and utilize our infrastructure that lays latent or is not actually being utilized to the full extent? A lot of companies have incredible investments in ICT equipment. And what's happened now, they're looking at the utilization not going above 40%. And they're saying, hey, I'm an insurance company. Why can't I compete with Dropbox? Why can't I compete with some of these other services on a local basis and offer a data insurance, a media insurance product on top of my infrastructure? Because the same way my staff are accessing services on the outside remotely from home, that same technological infrastructure will be utilized to deliver this new service that we're imagining. So it's going to be quite interesting to see businesses that were traditionally doing what they did all the time suddenly spawning technological product sets, new services, incrementing the portfolio of those services that's not anything to do with the current core business. And I think that's so competition. It's really a good time to start imagining the world this way so you can take a look at your competitive landscape a lot differently. Because what was your competitor before, I think over the next 24 to 36 months, that's going to change quite dramatically. So yes, leadership today is not just, they're thinking beyond enablement. For the first 3 to 5 months, the enablement story was the big thing. Like, how are we going to do this? And that accelerated a lot of things. But we were well equipped to do this because a lot of CIOs out there did a great job investing a lot of money, having the headroom. Now the question is, we've got this architecture. It's capable of doing these things. Hey, can't we also do all those other things? And I think that's going to be interesting to watch over the next 24 to 36 months. And I think that's the tectonic shift, not the user stuff that's happening on the edge. I think it's the infrastructural changes that are happening that's going to cause, a reshaping of businesses and new services to emerge that right now is completely not imagined, but it's coming.
Yeah, I often say when I'm discussing this, and especially the media, the biggest problem is not that the services exist, but that management doesn't understand how to use them. I mean, we've really gone from the most remarkable way or through the most remarkable shift, right? So I think about my father. My late father was a jeweler. He was trained by Cartier. He never actually, you learned your job by doing your job, an apprentice, this whole thing of being an appy, of a mentorship. We've gone from that situation where the older people in the organization teach the younger people all the skills they need to a situation where the youngsters come into a business with a whole set of skills that the older people don't know about. It used to be simple stuff like social media. Now it's, I don't know anyone under 25 who doesn't know how to use Google Docs and spreadsheets and all of the Google cloud-based software like it's Office. I mean, there used to be a time, I'm sure everyone remembers, where people used to put skills on their CVs like Microsoft Word, Excel. I can use Outlook. Now that's just a given. The tools are a given, and yet it's the youngsters coming into business who are saying, why are you doing it like this? Why don't you do it like that? Why don't you? And so in many ways, it's the management that doesn't understand or doesn't have the mental flexibility to see how much their business could change using this kind of skill. I mean, we're not going to throw the bathwater out by no means, but it's an inversion of the education and the business curve, isn't it?
Do you want me to address that, Toby? Do you want me to jump in on
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah,
Yes,
you're absolutely right. I do think, though, it's a two-sided coin. I think there's an enormous pressure on leadership today. And I think that's what you're alluding to. I think a leadership that doesn't have, digital DNA in their capacity in some way or form, either natively or within that C-suite, you've got to accelerate that. On your board, you need to have people that are digitally aware and have the experience. I think it's critical that boards have a digital capacity and competency constituted on them. I think that's critical right now. In the C-suite, on the ground, you need to have that as your spine. I think that's important. But I think the other side of the coin is, as much as we have, you and I come from the ICT industry, we have glamorized these engineers. We have given, platforms to people like Bezos and Zuckerberg, etc. We also see mini dystopias coming from that. So I do think that as much as we have these digital literate native people emerging, and they are very attractive in terms of their acumen, what they're capable of doing, their thinking, etc. We need to balance that out with the humanities. And I find that the humanities, the experience in that boardroom, the other folks that see the human impact, I think it's very, very important that we have that in the room too, because I think what is dangerous today is that all these technological tools and all this acceleration could lead to mini dystopias, with a lot of CEOs that are looking to utilize these tools to do more with less human beings. And that fitness function, that Milton Friedman, thing of the sole responsibility of an organization is to derive value for its shareholders. That fitness function, because of tools that are technological, because of AI, is greatly being accelerated right now. So we are seeing leadership that are thinking about, hey, wait a minute, everyone's working from home. That means I could offshore a lot of these services and get it cheaper somewhere else. I could do a lot of these things with less human beings involved. And we need to be careful. I think leadership doesn't only need to be digitally native and become a lot more immersed in it, but we've also got to balance it out with the humanities. It's not taking these tools to do more with less, which you can do today. It's actually asking, what's the human impact, and how can we do a human-machine symbiotic strategy to deliver on things that were previously unimaginable. Don't do more with less. Do what was previously impossible, because you now have the opportunity to do, because the technology architecture is so mature. So it's a two-sided coin, and we got to balance it out, and that's so important right now.
You had me at dystopia, Stafford. It's one of my favorite words that most people don't know about. The opposite of utopia is dystopia, or load shedding traffic. Is a good description of dystopia. So I'm actually an English literature graduate. I've never done a business degree. I got a degree in literature. I had a conversation with my late father about why I dropped psychology, and he said, you can get a job with it. And I said to him, Dad, you can understand more of human nature from literature than you will from psychology. And I still fundamentally believe that. I'm still a big consumer of literature. But it's often the thing that's misunderstood, and you're quite right. There's an aspect of humanity that's not being seen there. But I also think there's an aspect of what I loved about my father. And I'm not meaning to be having a retrospective, but my father, in his way, had a very simple system where he said, I said to him, why have I always got to learn the old way of doing it? And he said to me, you have to learn the classic way of doing things so that you can innovate. Now, I mean, he was 85 when he died 6 years ago. So this is a man, my mother's 92, he would have been 92 now himself, so 7 years ago. He's a very, very, very sharp perspective of the world. And I suppose in many ways, and I'm going to come to you about this, Gavin, that even though the youngsters bring a new set of skills into the business and into the world, there is a way of doing business that has always worked, and the fundamentals of business remain the same. There was a great comment in The Economist, I think maybe 15 years ago, about the new economy. Do everyone remember the new economy was basically the internet, and email was the new economy? And this quote said, basically what the new economy is going to do is make the old economy more efficient, which is essentially what every technology revolution has done, hasn't it, Gavin? So we don't want to throw out the tenets of business that work, but we do want to keep the good stuff, right? And innovate with what we can.
Absolutely. I think that the underlying principles of business has remained, and what technology has done is enabled us to do things. I love the way Stafford said it earlier. Technology has enabled us to do what was previously impossible. And the underlying principles of business is that you have to have a product that is solving a
28
fraud
minutes
problem
left. Any other
and is
message?
adding value into people's lives. I mean, that's the same value proposition that we're talking about has got to come through. It's not just about developing new technology and really kind of putting, for the sake of new technology together, but it's about really beginning to understand solving for problems and addressing issues that would otherwise not be addressed. And so technology is that enabler. And the value proposition that sits there is when people recognize the value of that and are prepared to pay for that. And so really the innovation aspect of it, it's business that underpins it, but technology allows us to solve for new problems because we have different problems. We don't have the same problems we had 10 years ago, even 2 years ago. There's new problems to solve, and we are able to address those problems with a new level of technology right now. So as more people come online in an African context, you talk about Africa, you talk about the growing middle class, what that's going to do, you're going to see that there are different problems that need to be solved, and technology is going to find ways, and people are going to find ways, and it's people that underpin that actually solve those problems, not technology by itself. So really, business, the underlying principles are there, the humanities are important, leadership is important, digital is important. The way we go about doing it is different, but the underlying principles are still there, still very much relevant.
Indeed, and I agree with that. But I'm going to cross to another subject. We've got about half an hour left, and I'm because it was for a long time the dominant thing, and I know that's what Stafford does. But I'm going to ask you, Jacqueline, the co-sharing, co-working space is very interesting, and for a lot of companies and a lot of small businesses, it's a no-brainer. You're not locked into a multi-year lease. You don't have to buy furniture or rent furniture. You get a walk in and work. What's a nice phrase? You get a walk in and work opportunity to do things done. And I know lots of big companies have done that. Certainly, my father-in-law has closed his office, got rid of his furniture, and rents offices. I don't think it's from you, Stafford. Sorry, but it is. And the flexibility is one of his staff lives in Midrand, the other lives in Centurion, someone else lives in Pretoria, and they can go into one of those offices and sit down and work. And of course, that's fantastic. But in the age of COVID, where we have such terror of exposure and being exposed, do you think the co-working space, Jacqueline, is going to stay as popular and be as popular? And you're going to answer as well, Gavin.
Absolutely. So I think we're just, in South Africa specifically, we're just in the beginning stages of really seeing what co-working can do and how it can enable kind of the gig economy, SMEs, freelancers and consultants. And for me, co-working is more than just the facility that you're able to use and share. Most co-working brands and offerings in the market layer on the network that you plug into. So I'm a sales and marketing specialist, being able to collaborate with app developers and coders, and I think it's that network and that ecosystem that really makes the co-working proposition incredibly valuable for consultants and SMEs and startups, throughout. So do I think that post-COVID, absolutely. It's something that will only grow and develop as people keep connecting and engaging and looking to collaborate and develop their ecosystems. Physically, it might change in terms of what the physical environment looks like, but most certainly the community building and that kind of network development that comes from co-working is most certainly only going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I agree, because my experience of the tech industry in Africa is that if you can, you work in a co-working space. Our hub in Nairobi, CC hub in Lagos, they are co-working spaces. Josie hub in South Africa. There's a whole bunch of other people. WeWork, Workshop 17, spaces. There's a bunch of opportunities for that, and I agree that it's that camaraderie, that sense of, I look at older people looking in our hub. Hub-like environments, and everyone's tapping away and working fast and tapping on the keyboard, but in many ways it's that energy of an office that you're replicating without the boring people from accounting. Don't tell accounting.
Toby, I get you, but you know what are we seeing in WeWork, and I think everyone else is seeing this too, that and we started seeing it before COVID, and this is again that accelerant, the way it just starts moving, and that is this generation of millennials that have emerged. You know, millennials have a very different expectation in a from a working environment. You know, they're always looking for values and they're always looking for purpose. You know, they don't just want a pretty space with nice furniture. You know, we saw inside of WeWork is, you know, it's not just about giving them a barista with beautiful coffee and you know the best tasting stuff, but the fact that the barista is a black female that is deaf, you know, resonates more with them than the free coffee. And when they engage with that person, they start engaging with them on that level, and they love to immerse themselves in the purpose. So I think this millennial generation are the folks that are going to be building the new tool sets. They're going to be building the next generation of innovation. Big enterprises have traditionally struggled to retain these skills within their environment. And with COVID coming along and accelerating all of this and creating an environment where this challenge becomes much, much bigger, it's how do you know, hire them and how do you retain them? That's a big question that enterprises have been dealing with and grappling with. And I think if you take a look at in the COVID world, yes, SMMEs see value. Yes, small businesses see value in these spaces. I get that 100%. But what we're seeing is the enterprise demand. The enterprise demand is quite significant. Why? Because they're obviously trying to reduce costs. There's this bottom line, let's get the long leases off our balance sheets objective. Yes, the economics of it, but the ability to provide a third space. You know, if you're a large enterprise, you got your staff working from home. You know, the only option is they either work from home or they go to this big office in the sky. Now, this, you know, which means 2 buses and a taxi to get there. The problem with working from home is that it is not sustainable, right? It's lovely. And people have gotten used to it, and the tools and services are there. But it's all environmentally, it's not always a great thing. You know, from a relationship perspective, gender-based violence is an issue that enterprises now have to deal with, associated with it too. How do you manage your culture? So a lot of enterprises are looking for a third space. Just like Howard Schultz spoke about, you know, Starbucks giving you, you know, that was your third coffee. That was your third place where you went to go get coffee. I think what a lot of the co-working spaces are delivering is that third space. It's another place where you can go. So if you're working from home, doesn't work for you, you need to do something intensely, or you need to have a meeting with just a few people. You don't want to be catching, you know, 2 taxis and a bus to get to that big office in the sky. I'm going to run around. I'm going to go to Workshop 17. I'm going to pop into a WeWork. I'm going to go to a Spaces, and I'm going to access it. So a lot of people are looking for space as a service. So there is the reduction in the capital, you know, cost perspective around the bottom line associated with a long-term lease. I think that's gone. I think people are not going to be signing long-term leases. I do think the hub and spoke model is going to break. I think there's this decentralized need out there for space where my staff can work from home. They can come to the office sporadically, but then in between, there's a need for space where they can come and work and be productive. And that's an interesting thing. So a lot of people are coming to us saying, hey, we'd like to get 800 WeWork cards, but they're also going to Workshop 17 saying, hey, we'd also like some space with you. And they're going to Regis, etc. And I think it's providing space as a service to an enterprise to allow my staff to have options. Because if I don't give them that options, they don't want to work for me. They'll go work elsewhere. And I think that's the emerging trend that we see happening specifically in the enterprise space.
Indeed, and I love your barista in Rosebank, and she's really cool, and she makes us seriously good for coffee. Indeed, it's that flexibility, isn't it? And I suppose in a way, it's the flexibility of how you run a business. I mean, I learned how to run a business from a friend of mine, who afterwards I discovered was actually a second cousin of my ex-wife, only in the Jewish community. In fact, she's off for France, my ex-wife. But I bought him a chicken salad with extra avid twice, and that was it. That was my business. That was my business education. And the second time I asked him to tell me the same stuff all over again, so I could understand it again. Just the basics of how you build for your time, how you build for. So I've just approached business without any of the preconceptions, and my friends often say to me it's useful because I have an abundance of common sense. I can thank other Sylvia, who's watching now, I'm sure, for giving us so much common sense and pragmatism. but in many ways, that's what people need. They need a flexible attitude. Michael Jordan often says this about running a big business like F&B when he was doing it, and the approach to risk. You got to experiment. You got to be flexible, and then you've got to be willing to make a few failures. I suppose, Gavin, that's the new business model that's appearing in the world, and then go on television and tell everyone that you're a English graduate, English literature graduate, and ask them to invest in your business. That's not part of the strategy, right?
Yeah, and don't forget about those 2 chicken salads, which changed your life, and you've never been the same since.
With extra avo.
With extra avo. Yeah, I think interesting point around the optionality and flexibility. And we have a generation of people that are becoming more and more accustomed to having optionality and flexibility to the workplace, and they haven't been able to get that up until now. And what COVID has done is basically corporatized the fact that flexibility is an option for your workforce. So to the enterprise level, it's now becoming more acceptable to actually work from home. And I think around the world globally, you've seen institutions like big banks, global banks, which have said, not only are we talking about Facebook and Twitter that aren't coming back to work, they're working from home, but you're talking about big banks that are saying, listen, we're actually giving our employees optionality. They're not all going to come back into the office just yet. There's going to be flexibility to work from home. It's not going to be the same. And I think that's really speaking to how things are changing. And from a digital environment, all the tools which then come with that, because it's not just about working from home, opening up a laptop. You still have to do your work. You still have to be productive. And so those sort of tools that encourage collaborative work, that offline, online, in person, not in the office environment, is very important. And that's part of the new digital transformation that we are seeing come into place. And so I think that as we all talk about this as it's a COVID moment, but this is going to persist for a while still, and we're going to see this evolve into a new way of how we work. And really, it's the beginnings of a new way of beginning to do things. And it's not, I think COVID is the accelerator to this. The fact that we're going to be in this state for a while just means that it's just going to, it really has an opportunity to sink in this new way of doing work, because it's not just let's go get back to normal next month. Hopefully, we've just gone to different lockdown levels in South Africa. So, the sense is that we're almost out of it, but you realize actually not. This is this new way of how we work together, how we interact in a workspace environment is certainly shifting.
It is indeed, and before anyone tries, we are not allowed to use that phrase, don't let a good opportunity go to waste. Because I mean, we're kind of saying something similar, I suppose, and I hope I'm not paraphrasing too simplistically. The trends have been in motion for a while. They've been accelerated by COVID, and in a way, terrible global tragedy, but it has necessitated a shift of the way we approach things and do things that wouldn't normally have happened quite so quickly or adapted quite so quickly. I suppose, do you agree with that, Jacqueline?
Absolutely. I think COVID has given us the opportunity for the biggest test case of remote working and enabling the freelancers and that kind of stuff remotely. So as much as it is a tragedy, and we understand that 100%, there is an opportunity here for acceleration when it comes to scaling this remote working opportunity.
Indeed, and let's move away from the remote working, because there's kind of more to this about remote workforces, because I suppose we are lucky to be part of that middle class desk-based laptop working world where we can work from home. The vast majority of people in most industries in the world don't have that luxury. They do have to go to work, and they do have to work, and they, in many ways, are probably the people always seen of most likely to lose their jobs. So we can't really tackle that in the time we have. But what we really need to do is talk not only about some kind of integrated, effective digital strategy, but one that covers the whole range of the kinds of works that people are doing. Jacqueline?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's understanding at a macro level what the offline to online journey is, and the various touch points, specifically in our society, and then working together to enable a multifaceted digital approach. Digital first is about understanding, which processes need to be engineered, and then how can technology and digital enable those processes to come alive in your ecosystem. So most certainly we have to understand that the largest majority of our society in South Africa don't have Wi-Fi to work remotely, etc., etc. And that's why one of the most interesting developments on the back of co-working for me is this notion of co-living. And there are a few real pioneers in South Africa bringing in co-living in the inner cities with urban regeneration and creating these tech-enabled kind of nodes where millennials can move to the city, stay in COVID-conscious buildings, and buildings that are, driven through app technology. I know Homey Lifestyle is one of the pioneers in our country, trying to bring co-living to the country and enabling that workforce that is excluded from this co-working. I don't have tech at home, or I don't have tech where I'm coming from, creating these kind of nodes where you can live and work in the city and do something meaningful. And this is enabled through app technology and digital ecosystems.
Indeed. And I suppose, Graham, you're obviously seeing businesses coming up with ideas and solutions around how to deliver these kinds of things. I would hope so in this.
Yeah, Toby, maybe just to speak about the issue of jobs and tech, and because I think that there is a bias and a fear-based view that tech is going to lose jobs and people are going to be out of jobs because of tech. There's actually no mistaking there does need to be a integrated approach towards on skills based, but the number of jobs that can be created because of technology is actually very, very significant. And there's a massive opportunity that sits in that space. I think the opportunity that we have is that technology is able to actually allow economies in Africa to compete at the global stage. And there is certainly, when you look at manufacturing, for example, manufacturing technology is going to be able to allow African countries to compete at a global and more advanced economy stage because of technology being an enabler to that. And really the opportunity that exists in that space, we mustn't be short-sighted and think that we're only talking about a potential loss of jobs here. The opportunity to create jobs, the flexibility in the jobs in that job environment is very, very real. A lot has been done in the study through some very smart consultants. And the net gain is significant. We do need to be able to make certain adjustments in that space, and I think the digital infrastructure that exists across Africa is going to be there's huge amounts of investment that's going into that space. The real risk actually we have is that digital infrastructure will outpace structural infrastructure to be able to deliver some of those goods. So we are going to move forward in this digital environment, and there's a new type of job that's going to be immersed into the space, and it doesn't mean that we are seeing the end of the factory worker for that.
Can I just add in there, Toby?
I was about to ask you.
Yes, it's, I sit on the board of the CSIR, and it does give me a vantage point in terms of where government leaders are thinking about this. And I think as beautiful as these opportunities are, as in the end, what technology will do is create jobs that we can't even imagine right now. But we are going through kind of our Luddite revolution at the moment. We are going through, with unions, etc. We do need leadership in the country to truly understand, comprehend, and have the ability to articulate a vision and a tangible strategy around the value propositions here that has the necessary political capital to execute. I think what we are struggling with in Africa isn't the opportunity that technology presents. It's, do we have leaders in the country that can set the right policy frameworks in place for a lot of the infrastructural things to occur that's necessary for these things to happen, right? Things like in South Africa, having an energy strategy, that as much as we spoke about the fourth industrial revolution, and we talk about if we don't have an alternative energy or a sustainable energy strategy, I mean, a lot of these things won't come to bear. We've got to speak to the unions. We've got to engage them deeply and truly get them to see what the medium to long term looks like over here and how they can get some political capital out of this. So I think as much as we speak about it in the private sector and in the domain of the few, which is probably the 10 million people in South Africa that have laptops, that have work from home, that have access to, fiber, et cetera, et cetera. If we talk about the 45 to 50 million other people out there, to bring them along, to ensure that we have more of an inclusion in here. And I think COVID, has really accelerated and highlighted the divide. I mean, we are one of the most divided, and the inequality in South Africa is bare. You can just literally see it there. And COVID's accelerating that inequality. And what we need to do is rapidly get our heads wrapped around from a leadership perspective. And what I've tried to do, and the reason I've joined the CSR board, and I encourage more people to do it, folks like Gavin, and get onto these public sector institutional committees and boards and lean in. And I think in South Africa, the ICT industry, the leadership, we haven't done a great job of coagulating and kind of collectively getting together and speaking to our leadership about the value propositions around digitization. And I think that's the greatest challenge that lays ahead for South Africa and Africa. It won't be the technological promise. It will be, alignment around legislation that allows a lot of these things to emerge and bear the fruits that they can. Because Africa does have, the next billion people that are going to get connected are going to be coming from here. But the next billion connection is not just a connection, right? It's the next billion people that are going to connect to AIs. And those AIs are going to allow them to do things that were previously unimagined. And I think we as Africa have got to start crafting a strategy around this, not just talking about 4IR because we heard it at the World Economic Forum, but really on the ground, on a local government level, imagine services different and allow for policies and frameworks to emerge for innovators to execute against this. And I think from a digitization, as a business, when you're thinking about this, business needs to lean in too. If you're taking a look at your workforce working from home, you can see the impact that technology can have on loss of jobs. It can really have the short to medium term around technology could be completely dystopian, right? But I like what Tim O'Reilly says. If the machines do disintermediate us, if they truly do take away our jobs, it won't be because of them. It will be because of a lack of imagination on behalf of leadership, to kind of imagine a future and to execute against that. And I think that's the burden on us today in business, to take a look at these opportunities that they present, but then also to engage with our societal impact here, to engage with our governmental institutions and have businesses that are more humane, that are looking at things more on aggregate versus just in this insular concentration of wealth way. And that's been accelerated. COVID has greatly accelerated the burden on our shoulders to do that. Because all these things that are beautiful are equally dangerous, especially for Africa.
Indeed, and I once coined a phrase that Africa's mobile only. It was your former boss and friend Eric Schmidt speaking at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, talking really 10 years ago about how Google considered itself a mobile first business because it programmed for mobile before any of the other things. And I realized that that Africa is mobile only. There is no other option. And as a result, our solutions, which the rest of the world is quite rightly very impressed with, and everything from mobile money to the way we transact and the way we communicate. MTN is a fantastic service called Ayoba for messaging. It's kind of a WhatsApp Telegram competitor. Clever ideas from Africa to make things work. Ushahidi, the fantastic Kenyan real-time reporting tool that is now used for the earthquake in Haiti, the forest fires in Russia, reporting anonymously drug dealers in Mexico City. This is, these are African technologies that are rolling out because we only had mobile phones. And as a result, we've done things with mobile phones much more sophisticated than, say, people will say, well, in Scandinavia, you could buy a printer with a short SMS code. Well, great, but that was built on the back of everything else. So in many ways, I agree, Stafford, and I like this humanist angle to things, because at the end of the day, we are people. And I think that's what people forget, especially governments. Jacqueline, governments, I mean, imagine doing a rebranding exercise for the Department of Home Affairs, or, whoever it was who really banned cigarettes. I mean, imagine how you'd have to talk to people. But in many ways, the problem with government services, while we're talking about digital strategies, is they're so inhuman.
It's not a political statement at all. 100%. I think that if it's about being able, again, comes back to what Stafford was saying, it's about being able to articulate the humanity and find that human connection. I think what happens with government or large corporate is sometimes we get lost in the process, and it's about doing something the way it's always been done because that's the way it's done. And that there is a lack of a space or freedom created for individuals within, government services or corporate to innovate and bring new ideas to the table out of fear that it won't work or it's going to fail. And then we create this, this culture of compliance and submission. And I think that if we had to rebrand Home Affairs, or we had to rebrand the very first thing would be to kind of just, pick everything apart and what is here that is meaningful. How is this service connecting to the social need we're trying to answer? And if it doesn't, get rid of it. And if it does it work in its current format, or do we need to reinvent it? Do we need to reinvigorate it? And then take it from there. I think to your point earlier, from biggest necessity, the biggest opportunities are born. So that's how I would approach rebranding.
Indeed, and hello to your dog. And I think that's a great way to sum it up, because we're running out of time. What works? What doesn't work? How do you work that out? How do you see what works? And of course, I don't want to get into too much political statements, but the same problems people have throughout Africa. How do we make government more efficient? And in many ways, I think that's part of what we do. Business makes our lives, and it makes its employees' lives better, and it offers better services. Maybe there's a way we can feed some of that back to government and help get government more efficient. But just to sum up what we've discussed today, it is a brand new world, and I don't want to be too simplistic in saying what we're seeing are the acceleration of many of the trends that we've seen coming for many years, and they're coalescing around this terrible global pandemic that has been a real tragedy for the world, and a lot of people have lost their businesses and their incomes and other things. But it is human nature to survive, isn't it? My forebears survived the concentration camps and Auschwitz, so did Stafford's, and I don't know who else is Jewish, I'm sorry. And we survived apartheid. And as terrible as things have been in our country in the last 10 years of the end of the Zuma administration and the damage that COVID has done to us, it is human nature to survive. It is human nature to evolve. And we just have to remember that it's all of us. We have to remember everybody who's lucky enough to work from home and have a job where you can do it. is that everybody needs to be taken with, and we have to find a way to take everyone. And that, of course, is the role of a leader. A leader has to lead the entire country, not just their voting bloc or not just the people on Twitter. It's important, as Stafford brought up, that the humanity of our society and our businesses need to be remembered. And Gavin, you've brought in some very good points, but I'm afraid that's all the time we have for. Thank you very much for joining us on this Future of Work panel and on CNBC, and hopefully we'll do something like this again. Great way of doing this. Thank you for letting me wear a t-shirt, and thank you to all the panelists for joining us.
Thank you very much, moderator Toby Shapshak. Also talking there to Stafford Macy, Gavin Reardon, and to Jacqueline Raw. Now, after the break, we move on to our final panel discussion for the day, empowering the workforce to harness IoT and big data analytics. Do stay tuned.